Hey guys, just a heads up, this is part 2 to a video I started earlier, so make sure you check out that video before continuing to watch.
So now we can go back to our app.js and focus on the actual search functionality and calling the API to get the words that we want that rhyme with it and the definitions. So I'm going to go back to our API here quick. And as I mentioned before, I'm using the DataMuse API. It's just an open source API that actually, if you know the website RhymeZone, this is the API that they use. And if you're asking yourself, why am I building a site if there's already one that exists that's kind of like this? Well, this is good and has a lot more options. It's a lot more customizable. But I just wanted to build something that is a lot more simple to use and a lot quicker. And if you're not used to using APIs, it's a good intro to using API calls and managing your state within React. So this is our API that I'm going to be using, and I will link this down in the description. I would recommend you guys to check this out. It's pretty fun. You can do a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can find with it. It's a lot more than just rhyming. So this is an example of an API call that we're going to make. So we can see here that we're going to use if we go back, does a good job of explaining it. So we can use the related word constraint, and the constraint that we want to use, the code is RHY, which just stands for a perfect rhyme. And you can do things like approximate rhymes and stuff like that. So there's a lot of functionality you can pull from this API. And then this right here, trip, is our keyword. So if I type basketball, we can get all the words that rhyme with basketball and the definitions. And by default, this won't return definitions as well. So we can add this metadata flag. That's what MD stands for. And then the D stands for definition. So I will actually copy this, and we will go back to our component. And now we can create a function that's called onChange. And this is going to take an event. And before we do that, actually, we need to create some state. So let's do public constructor. And actually, I'm used to TypeScript. We just can do constructor props and then super props. And if you're new to React, this is a pretty standard way to initialize a state in React. So then we can do this.state equals an object, and we're just going to have one thing in our state, and that's going to be search results, and that's going to be in an array of our results. Perfect. So now we can get to our main method here. So we want to be able to search either by one word or by a phrase. And the way that we're going to build it so that you can search by a phrase is that if you type in more than one word, we're just going to find the last word to rhyme with it. So it's kind of a workaround, but honestly, it works for now, and this actually needs to be a comma. There we go. Yeah, so let's do a little bit of array and string manipulation to get that to work. So we're going to have a const called terms, and we're going to set this to e.target.value. So this is going to be whatever we entered into our search input, and then we're going to split this on a white space. And then to get the last word from our array of words now, I'm going to set a const last word to our terms, and then to get the last value in this array, I'm going to index it at terms.length minus 1. Perfect. And now if I actually just log out last word, and if I add onChange, we should be able to get the last word. So if I open up the DevTools here, and if I type ball, we can see we're getting ball down there. Hopefully you can see that. And if I type in more than one word, more than one word, we can see we're getting just the last word, which is exactly what we want. Perfect. So now if we go back to our code, we can actually make the API call. So we're just going to be using the fetch API. It's pretty simple to use. There's a lot of third-party libraries that you can use like Axios, but I just figured fetch is the simplest and the most straightforward way, and it's good to know how to use fetch if you're a JavaScript developer. So how the fetch API works is we're just going to call fetch, and then we need to get our API endpoint. So if we go back again and copy this, actually I'm going to put this in backticks because we're going to want to be able to dynamically change this keyword here. So right now this is just set to basketball, but we can change that in a second. And then this is returns a promise, so we're going to say then we can do res and return res.json, and then then we want our words to be, we're going to set our search results to these words. Perfect. So now we can actually, because we're using JavaScript template literal, string template literals, we can change basketball to our last word. So how this is going to work is on every keystroke, this is going to reach out to the API and update our state. Now this obviously isn't the most performant way to do this, and if you were going to use this as a production app, I would seriously consider how many users you're going to have and if this is the best method that you want to go about it. I'm just doing this because it's a pretty small application and I want to get that real-time search feel. So we should be able to save that. And now if within our render method, if we log our state, we should see, oh, and I messed up somewhere. So this actually needs to be this set state. I don't know what I'm doing here. There we go. Now that should work. So just type W. Oh, interesting. But if I just type word, so we get 100 results. Bluebird, bird, absurd, incurred, nerd, herd. So it's just a bunch of words that rhyme with word. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we are looking for. Okay, perfect. So now let's find a way to display this data on our application. So if we create a new file, I'm going to create a component called searchresult.js and make sure this is set to React. I think there's a way to set this as your default, but for some reason this isn't set up on this machine, so I'll have to look into that later. But this is just going to be a functional component, so I can type RFC and my snippet will do the rest for me. And we're going to need a few things here. First off, we're going to need the actual result container. And then we are going to have a anchor tag so that when we click on the word, we'll be able to link out to the dictionary.com definition of the word. So I'm going to type a.word. So I'm just creating an a tag with the class name of word. And as an href, we can go to dictionary.com. And if we just search for a word, you can see that this is the URL that they use, so it's pretty simple, so I'll copy that. For now, I'll just set that to something basic like Word. And I'll hide the sidebar there so you can see a little better. And inside this, we are going to just display our word, and we'll have one more. And actually, we'll we won't worry about the displaying the definition at this point. But we're going to pass in some props to this component, and we're going to pass in, if you remember our API call, we're going to pass in this word object, or this result object. So it has the definitions, the number of syllables, the score, and the actual word itself. So I can expect that. So I'll need the word. Actually, I'm just going to call this result, and we can destructure that from props. And then we can access that inside of our anchor tag and our markup by just doing result.word. Okay, so there we go. So we go back to our app.js. We can map all of our results. So the easiest way to do that is just to do this .state.search results.map. Not that, I don't know what that was. And for each result, we can render our search result, and we can pass in our result equals result. And if I hover this, we can actually still have to import that. So we can import search result from search results. Search result. There we go. Now that should display all of our results on the page. So let's make sure that's working. So if I type word, we can see perfect. And it's probably going to be really hard to see because it's still using the default browser anchor tag link styling. We can see all the words that rhyme with word, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now let's add some more styling to just make this look a lot nicer. So we can go back to our app.css, and you can use your own separate CSS files if you want. I'm just using one CSS file just to make things easier. So I'm going to set the results container to width 100%. And now just for the result container, so now this is a singular container that we added to our search result component. We'll set this to text align center, font size of 30 is good, font weight of say 600, and let's just give it a text transform of uppercase just to make it look a little different and differentiate it from the rest of the text on the screen. And we'll give each one a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom. Perfect. So now let's also add our styling for the links, because if you see, it's the same thing still. So let's add our styling for that. So I'm going to do result container and then the a tag. We can copy up here because we want it to be the same color we've been using for this off-white, and do text decoration, and we can do none, and that should look pretty good. Perfect. And if we click, let's say I click occurred, you can see that it actually links to, oh, this is just Word. So I have this hard-coded in here yet. So, and you actually notice that it opened in the same tab, which is something that we don't want. We never want to take users away from our application. So let's go back to searchresult.js, and inside here we can change this to string literals. And instead of word right here, we want to change this to result.word. Perfect. And something that we always want to do when we link in a new tab is set the, well, first off, we want target equals blank, and we're going to set the rel to equal no opener and no refer. And that's just a security measure that you always want to make sure that you're taking when you set the a tag to target blank. Okay, so now let's just make sure that our linking out is working. So Bluebird opens in a new tab to Bluebird, which is perfect. You can close that tab now. So now the final step is we just want to add the definition underneath the word. So that's pretty easy to do. So remember, if we look back at our object, we can see that on each result we have this defs array, and there's a few, sometimes there's several definitions for a word, and sometimes there's none at all. So we're just going to use the first one. Okay, so let's go back to our code. Underneath the link, we're going to add a div called definition. And inside here, we're going to first make sure that our result exists, and then that our result.defs, and actually we don't need to make sure our result exists. We are going to say if result.defs.length is greater than 0, then we can return result.defs and just the first one. And actually I think we need to check just to make sure that result.defs exists too. And let's go back and make sure that is working correctly. Okay, so now the definitions are showing up, which is perfect, but it looks horrible. So let's just do some final styling for our definition, and then we will be done with the application. So let's select our definition and set the font size to 14 pixels, font style italic, text transform, and none. And that should be all that we need for that. Perfect. So now it looks pretty good. There's a little bit of font variation, and you can use different colors. Obviously, it's all white text, so there's not a whole lot of distinguishing between the different elements. So yeah, I think that will do it for this video. We can type another word. We can do computer, and we can get some rhyming words, which is perfect. And also, you can see now that when we scroll, our input field stays at the top. And remember, we set the position to sticky, and we set the, I'll go back to it here, we set the background color of the search input to the same color as the body background. That's because if we didn't do that, or if we set it to transparent or something, the words would come behind the input, and it would just look very weird. So, as always, for all my how-to videos, this code will be on GitHub, and I will link that in the description below. And I'd be curious to see how you guys can improve this app. Obviously, it's very simple. There's a lot of things you can do to enhance it and make it a lot better. You could add a debounce, so it's a little more efficient with the network calls, and you could add a loading spinner, and there's just a lot of things you guys can do. You can play around with this DataMuse API. You can explore what these other codes and these other query parameters do. So yeah, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any ideas for a specific video that you would like me to do. Catch you later.